Second, being all yes vote, motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the appointment standing vacation of the Lincoln County Commission by Merle Hugh Clark.
So moved.
Motion, I'll second, being all yes vote, motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the exoneration orders as submitted by Tracy Dempsey, assessor.
So moved.
Second, being all yes vote, motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the employment of Rex Ray Clark as law enforcement deputy at a rate of pay of $24,000 annually effective August 1st, 2012, as requested by David Vicker, Sheriff.
This is all in his budget.
Yeah, he's got both of these positions.
So moved.
I'll second, the motion second, be all yes, motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the employment of Joshua Kenneth Huffman as law enforcement deputy at a rate of pay of $24,000 annually effective August 1st, 2012, as requested by David Vicker, Sheriff.
So moved.
I'll second, being all yes vote, motion carries. And the chief deputy, does that make us full now? We got all our deputies, or we still got a vacancy?
We have one vacancy.
I need a motion to remove Barbara Nelson from the Lincoln 911 part-time employee list effective July the 25th, 2012, as requested by Alan Holder, Director.
So moved.
Second, then all yes vote, motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the purchase of a 2013 Chevrolet Tahoe four-wheel drive from Whiteside Chevrolet in the amount of $32,900 to be paid from the FEMA EMPG program through a lease purchase program for the Lincoln OES as requested by Alan Holder, Director.
But we went through all the proper things to do and everything, didn't we?
It's off the state bid list.
It's off the state bid.
Okay, so moved.
I'll second, then all yes vote, motion carries.
Alan Holder.
Welcome, Alan. I told Judy to put you last because I said he's never on time, and here you were right here on early.
I'm usually on time, I just select the time I
You're on your time.
These
right?
days you wait until the cameras are gone before you show up. I wanted to provide a summary to the commission and anyone from the public tonight on what was done during the last few weeks during the storm. Although we did receive some criticism in the Lincoln Journal after having some discussion with the individuals involved, they blame all of that on the paper as a misquotation. So you tell me, at least if it's recorded tonight, they can't misquote us. We started working on the incident as soon as the wind stopped that Friday night in an attempt to determine what the overall situation was in the county and overall state. Did our first conference call that morning about 1:30 in the morning with the West Virginia Department of Homeland Security, Military Affairs. And early on, I recognized and felt like our biggest issue was trying to keep the public water in the county up and running. Granted, everybody doesn't have public water, but if we lost the public water, then we lost the avenue for everyone to get water even from those facilities. And at that time, pretty much every facility in the county, with the exception of the area served by West Virginia Water, which is relatively low, either had no power or the power was out. The Alum Creek Pump Station was out. One of their two, where their treatment plant was out. The only thing over there that had power was their facility there at Samarico, but if you can't get water to it, it didn't do them any good. The West Hamlin pump station at the bottom of West Hamlin Hill was out, and the West Hamlin treatment facility was out, which supplies water all the way down to Route 37 and out Route 37 for that whole end of the county. So we immediately requested 2 additional generators from the state of West Virginia. We have one 100 kW generator that belongs to the county. We immediately took that to Alum Creek, and luckily we had received a grant last year for a 250 kW unit, which is what's required for both of those 2 plants over either Alum Creek or West Hamlin. Just kind of by fluke, they delivered it to us Thursday afternoon before the storm, a couple of days early, and told us not to start it until the technician come out and started it. They were just delivering it. Well, we got it started and we put it to use, and for the first 48 hours we shuttled that generator between Alum Creek and West Hamlin around the clock, pumping a little bit at one place and pumping a little bit at another place and then going back until the 2 generators that we ordered came from the state. The generator at West Hamlin ran for a few days. the pump station generator at West Hamlin ran for a few days. We were able to keep that system up and running without any loss of service on the main line. And then Branchland Midkiff has a generator that they were shuttling from facility to facility, keeping water up there. The one at Alum Creek ran for about 5 days to keep their pump station open. And basically the report shows several things that we did. We requested a lot of ice, a lot of water, and then at the last page it kind of gives it a summary. But at this point, I think the county's expenses are going to be somewhere around $65,000 for the expenses that you authorized me to make. A portion of it was in contract labor. In the past, we have always used the Red Cross to assist us with shelters. The Red Cross had no one available for any shelters. Initially, the Red Cross told us that they couldn't set up shelters for cooling stations. We used contract workers. We had some workers that actually stayed at some of the shelters for 5 days, 24 hours a day, around the clock. We also had additional equipment that we leased and rented to handle the incident. We had about $7,500 in overtime for regular staff. In addition, my office acquired and distributed $75,000 worth of bottled water, which was paid for by the state. That was 11 tractor-trailer loads of water. An additional 25 pallets of ice was picked up and distributed at an estimated cost of $36,000. It was pretty obvious that we had our hands full with the first load of water first load of ice we got here 5 days into the incident. There were 10 states affected, and everywhere that the state would normally contract to buy ice was either affected or had no power themselves. So the first truckload of ice that we got into the county came from Alabama. And once we got it, it was gone within a matter of a few hours. But we did buy an ice machine, and we distributed about 1,500 bags of ice that was either made in our basement or ice that we robbed from the high school because it got power back on pretty early on. We tried to limit that to patients that had medications and critical medical needs that needed to keep that medicated. And we also distributed 3,750 meals ready to eat, which was about $37,000, which was paid for by the state. I know Kevin and Mud River Fire Department passed out an awful lot of meals, and I never thought that the military rations looked very good, but I think you also, there were a lot of people that had very appreciative comments when you got them to them. But there was a lot of people up and down Mud River that that was the only thing they had to eat for 2 or 3 days. So it made a big difference. Since the storm, we have had 2 meetings, and we're going to have several more. We had a meeting with our shelter operators Tuesday night of this week to discuss things that we did right, things that we did wrong, things that we want to do differently. Probably come up with 10 ideas or so. Several of them very worthwhile, and most of them are not going to be very expensive to carry on or to carry out. But we want to work with the school board an approach to get fuel or emergency power to the fuel tanks that the school board has around the county. As everybody knows, we had a real issue with fuel. We had a real issue with getting fuel, and we had to keep those generators up. We also had to keep fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, and everybody else with fuel for emergency services. And there was only so much fuel to be had early on. So we want to try to work with the school board to at least make emergency power available with those fuel tanks. We're going to come up with a set of guidelines and rules to be used in the shelters. Quite frankly, the first few days was okay, but we had probably 35 to 40 people staying in the shelter 24/7 over at Duval Middle School. The first few days was okay until somebody decided to strip a couple of the computer labs of their copper and steal a bunch of cameras. They had several $1,000s worth of damage over there. Luckily, when you steal a camera and the camera's already transmitted your picture somewhere else, they know who it was. And I think they've already made an arrest in that, if I'm correct. So once that occurred, the Sheriff's Department provided additional security. I think Greg spent 1 night over there walking the halls, making sure, you spent 2 nights over there making sure that people behaved like they should have. So we're going to have to look at some additional security in the future if we do that. The other issue was some need for some showers. There was a shower at the high school or the middle school, nothing at McCorkle. I know they've talked about that in the past. That was one of the things that come out of our meeting, if we could just have some showers there and then maybe a shower available at the other end of the county where people that were okay to stay at home but still didn't have running water and didn't have the way to get cleaned up and deal with it would help. We also talked about additional use of oxygen, some way getting an oxygen generator where we could do our own oxygen. We ran out of oxygen in the county. We tried to bring in oxygen, but it was such a demand statewide, getting oxygen in here was a huge issue. And Johnny, you've had more experience with that. You work for Kanawha County, and I think their oxygen generation piece of equipment broke during all this. Did it go out of
We
service?
had people from Lincoln, Kanawha, Boone, all over coming to get the oxygen. And it's a good system for that county. I think we need a system like that for this county, for the many people that's got, who's on homeowner too. Because I know up at my station, we completed all of everything we had up there.
So that's something that came out of that meeting the other night, and your name came up, so we're gonna talk to you, since I think you had a hand in installing that system up there, as far as what it would take to get something here where we could refill oxygen bottles and actually make oxygen ourselves with a small unit. Also some discussion about some ice chests. Because of the need for ice, it was nowhere to be found. Getting an ice chest, putting one at Harts, putting one at McCorkle, so that we could keep 50 or 100 bags in hand all the time, so that when the power went off, it could be distributed out of there. Also came up the discussion of using social media. In the past, Facebook has been more of a headache for me, as it's been a help, but I think maybe at this point we'll explore what we can do with a Facebook page or something with the county OEM office to put some additional information, and also working with some of the churches that have some other resources to develop a list of resources that the churches might be able to offer us. So today we met with a couple of public service districts about what we need to do, better work with them, and the issue came back up to additional pre-wiring on the building. West Hamlin had pre-wired that facility with this in mind from some of our meetings last year, so it was a matter of backing the generator up, plugging it in. But that's not the case everywhere across the county. And I've already spoke to you directly about working with some others to try to do that. But if you try to find an electrician on a good day, let alone a bad day, sometimes they're hard to find. So getting an electrician to hook up a 400 amp service with 250 kW generator is not just anybody that you want to touch voltage to that degree. So still working with some of them, and I think Branchland Midkiff is going to, 3 of their 4 facilities have emergency power already ready where they can back in, the 4th one doesn't. So we're going to continue to work with them as far as the specifications on what we can do with the emergency power. But that gives you an overall where we're at. Within the next couple of weeks, we've got the State Firemen's Convention and a couple of other things that are going to create some issues, but we want to have another after-action meeting with fire, police, EMS, and emergency services providers and discuss basically the same thing and add them to our list of action items. And then we're going to start to do something with the public, probably 3 meetings across the county, and ask the public to come in and tell us what would help them, because sometimes ideas and things that we come up with are completely different than what somebody who lived through the storm themselves is. So that's where we're at this time. Next week on Tuesday, we're going to have a meeting with FEMA and hopefully all agencies affected, fire, police, EMS, the county, my office, the water plants, everybody that's a nonprofit organization or a governmental entity will come together and look at our expenses and find out what we're eligible for reimbursement. And I think at this point, pretty much all of the expenses that we've had are going to be reimbursed through FEMA. But you know, you think about what we've got, but every single water plant in the county had significant overtime. Every single PSD had significant expenses getting electricians called out and getting them to work with the system. So there's a lot of agencies that have expenses involved, In addition, we surveyed all of the businesses in the county to find out, number one, how much food you lost, number two, how many days were you closed, and how much revenue you lost. And overall, we look at the economic impact of the storm to be about $500,000 just in the businesses that threw away food or had to be closed because they had no power. So although don't have a whole lot of buildings destroyed, don't have a whole lot of building damaged, the impact was still very significant.
Well, I was gonna say, when we met with the AEP guys, like he was here the last time, we had talked about, you know, different things that might occur as we had these catastrophic storms coming through, and we had talked about burying some of these lines, and he was talking about the prohibitive expense of doing so. And I've been kind of looking around at some things in the meantime. It seems to me like the numbers I saw in rural areas, it's not a whole lot more expensive to put in the ground than it is, you know, with the infrastructure they'd have to build up in the air. And I don't remember exactly where I saw this at, but it was comparing the cost of going underground in suburban, urban, and rural areas. And by far the rural areas were like 1/4 the cost of what it would be in a suburban or urban area. And my thoughts were, is these storms continue, because we're building up all these expenses associated with them each time they hit. And I'm sure AEP is too, and they're going to require us to pay them back for their expenses. That somewhere along the line we need to really look at the long-term effect of keeping them up in the air in these rural areas where we have the trees growing and things like that, versus going ahead and putting them underground, especially in high areas where we see high power outages in rural areas. And I know that's not one of their priorities, because they try to get most of the urban and most of the people on the streets they can, which that can be understood, but you know, all of us kind of live in a rural area, so if they're going to look at putting these things in the ground, they ought to start doing it in the cheapest area possible for them, and in the areas that's impacted most by the storms, as far as trees and things like that. Because I know the guys up on Mud River and up on 9 Mile Creek where I was at, I mean, we spent days cutting trees out of lines and everything, even before AEP got in there. I mean, we were, you know, there was a lot of and I will say though, this was probably the most devastating I've seen the winds cause problems as far as the amount of damage it was done. So, but just in thinking, if this keeps recurring and recurring and recurring, somewhere along the line we're going to have to make a decision to stop that instead of keep paying the additional expenses each time they occur.
It seems like every year that have go by, the electric utilities seem to be less and less and less reliable. And I don't know about anybody else, but I just don't see the right-of-ways cut like they were when I was a kid.
Well, my comment exactly, when I left here from the last commission meeting, talking with the AEP fellow, I went home and didn't have electric for 2 days. And, you know, and it really kind of, and it's went off twice since then. Of course, you know, I solved that problem maybe with my backup generator, but it's something I know.
But everybody's not in a position to do that either.
Right, a lot of people can't afford to do that, and a lot of people that I know that were sick, or patients of mine down on 9 Mile, sat on their front porch, you know, just like you're talking about the oxygen situation. You know, that's a matter of life and death in some situations. And several of my patients were in Huntington in the hospital, and, well, when they had it down there, to keep because they couldn't exist at home. You know, they just couldn't live there without those type of things. So, but I do think what you're suggesting as far as increased security at the sites and things like that, maybe involving the auxiliary deputies and things like that. But it looks like you're taking the bull by the horns. That's what we need to do. We don't need to wait till the next one. We need to, because these things I think are going to come in a lot more frequently than what they did, and we need to be prepared as best we can.
You know, I think when we got on our conference calls, we did it twice a day with the state during the heat of the incident, and we would listen to every county reporting what they had. There were some counties that were in a lot worse shape than we were 4 and 5 days into the incident, because they didn't have any water for them. Half the county, or the largest portion of the county, was without water, or they weren't getting the resources. And one thing that we did when we built my large building that I have up on the hill, was we got enough storage space in the basement that we have a certain amount of resources on hand. And for the first 48 hours, we saw no resources from FEMA. We saw no resources come in from the state. We had several skids of drinking water that was on storage there. I think we had 6 at the time that was distributed on Saturday and Sunday before we saw the first truck on Monday. So we've continued to try to add to that stockpile. We've placed some in the Harts area. some water there, and as soon as we get the manpower, we're gonna place some over at McCorkle and have some of that strung out around the county so we don't have to. But it's so important for us to be prepared for those first 48 hours because we're on our own. You're not going, you can call and ask for all the help you want from Charleston and all the help you want from Washington. They're not gonna be there for 48 hours.
Well, I wanted to, the people of Nine Mile want to thank you because of the day that I contacted you and things, they got up here and started working and putting the power in. So it was really, you know, they may have already been going to do that, Alan, but I told them that you got it done for them.
Yes,
So I appreciate that. We did call, but there were times that, you know, we've got a special number that the public doesn't have to call the power company. And it got to the point where we were all sent an email, write your stuff down, fax it to this number. They didn't have the people to answer. AEP said they had almost 450,000 customers, not 450,000 people. So you multiply that by 2, take the amount of people that was in Monongalia Power's area in the northern part of the state, multiply it by 2 people in a household, it was pretty much 90% of the state without power. They said it was the largest power outage that AEP had ever seen, it was the largest power outage that Verizon had ever seen, and it was the largest power outage that AT&T Wireless had ever seen. So when you take that into consideration, it was historic in so many ways. But the one thing that I want to reiterate, we had a lot of people that over the last 4 or 5 years, they've gotten rid of their home phone and they've put in a cell phone. And those cell phone towers have battery backups. Those cell phone towers don't have generators, and they're good for 18 hours. And after 18 hours, you better hope you still have your house phone. Likewise, the voice over IP systems, you've got to have power with your modem at home or it's not going to work. So everybody's gotten to, let's save a little bit of bucks, but you get what you pay for. So Washington has asked all of the cellular telephone companies to report back, and they've asked for comments from the 911 directors on how stable was the 911 system across the country. And quite frankly, it was only as stable as the power was in that area. You know, we've probably got 6, I think we've got 6 cellular sites in this county. 2 of them have power generators. The others have batteries. After 18 hours, you're gone. So the only thing I say to the public is, sure, if you want to save a little money, that's great. But don't think that that cellular phone or that voice over IP line has the same redundancy as that wired line that Grandma and Grandpa had for 50 years, because it doesn't. It's not the same thing. And you can't rely on it in the same way.